you. Thank you so much. It is incredible to be here with this gathering of people from around the world, seasoned professionals and young people together across Central America and Europe and even Pakistan. I understand there's 52 sites participating, all coming together to focus on how can we be better leaders? How can we generate better leadership? And with all the crises going on in the world at this time, it's such an important topic. So I'm excited to be here participating. I was brainstorming with Eileen about all the different messages you're going to hear about leadership today and thinking, where can I add something? And I do a lot of leadership development training for corporations around the world, and so many different things I could talk about. And looking at everything you're going to get, the one thing I decided I should add is really this note about inclusive leadership, which is such an important topic right now. For young people, you're seeing it on campuses with protests about Black Lives Matter and other racial issues. We're seeing it in the campaign. There's been a lot of really ugly rhetoric generating fear about Muslims and people who are different than us. And so I think we see it in our face that this is still, we thought this issue might go away, still a really important issue. And in corporations, it's keenly felt because we have more generations working side by side in the workplace than ever before. We have more people with disabilities coming back to work, joining the workforce, and getting more accommodations, being able to participate more than ever before. Veterans coming back, participating in the workforce. We have such diversity. We used to think about diversity just in terms of black and white or men and women, but now we're looking at global diversity. People are leading teams that span the globe and bringing together different cultures, different perspectives, different ideas. And so the corporations I work with are very interested in how do we train leaders to be good at getting the best out of this incredible variety of people. Diversity used to be talking about how do we make sure we hired enough different kinds of people, are we fair hiring? We've gotten way past that, and diversity is really a more complex subject. Inclusion really takes it to a new level. Do we have the slide up? Can we get the slide up? It is. Oh, it's up behind me. Thank you. Okay. So I wanted to make the point, traditional leaders, you're good at leadership, you learn all these things about how to be a great leader, and then you lead your people, and then you rate them. You're a high performer, you're a medium performer, and you're a low performer, but I'm a good leader. Nowadays, there's a lot more pressure on leaders to not just be a good leader, but to flex their leadership style for different kinds of people. If you've got different cultures, if you've got different countries represented on your team, you need to flex to get the best out of everybody. You don't just say, oh, you're a low performer. You figure out, how do I bring them along? How do I get the best out of everyone? So when you think about this complex topic, I'd like to say I'm an optimist. And to give you an example why I'm an optimist, tell you a story. When I started skiing, the first time, people always wonder, how does a one-legged black girl from San Diego, California, end up thinking, yeah, I'm going to go skiing, right? Our family didn't have a lot of money either. My mother was a single mom, a school teacher. We didn't have money left at the end of the month. We had months left at the end of the money. You know what I mean? But this friend of mine, Barbara Warmath, in high school, invited me to go skiing with her family over Christmas vacation. And when you think about that, that's crazy. She's white, I'm black. If anybody's familiar with San Diego, she lived in La Jolla, right? The really rich side of town. I lived in National City, which is right near the Mexican border. It's where the gangs are. If you drive to the beach from where I live, it's not a beach, it's a military base, It was not the scenic part of San Diego, right? So I had surgery on my leg in high school as well, so I was even exempt from PE. So she turned to her one-legged black friend from the wrong side of the tracks and said, skier. That's incredible, the ability to reach out. And it tells you a number of things about diversity and inclusion, right? We were friends. So I had a friend who was very different than me, and that's really important to be able to make those connections and get outside your comfort zone to make friends. She had faith in me. Actually, she came on a talk show with me years later, and the host asked, didn't you think it would mess up your Christmas vacation to take your one-legged black friend along? And she said, no, I knew she could do it. I knew she could do it. Now, I fell down a lot on that trip, but she really helped me and made a difference. The other thing I think that is interesting about this story is when I was on the U.S. ski team, I was actually the third-ranked member of the ski team, but I went on to win medals. I ended up beating even my teammates and winning medals. Had I not been on the team, we wouldn't have won as many medals that year. So when corporations think about why is inclusion important, why is it important to bring on different kinds of people, it's about winning, right? It's about getting the best performers. If she wasn't picking out somebody who wouldn't usually be picked for skiing, we wouldn't have won as many medals in the US. So it's about this connection. So I'm an optimist that we can do this, we can change the world. It's happened in my life. I see it all the time. It's great. But I'm also a realist. This is kind of a tough story. My uncle, well, let me back up. My mother is black and my father is white. St. John is my last name. Goes all the way back to England, very British name, very white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago, when my parents were married, it was a little bit of a scandal. It was difficult, and there were some things that happened. But later on, I grew up, and about 10 years ago, I moved to New York City. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to call up my uncle. I'm going to get in touch with my uncle. Now that I've been in the Olympics and graduated from Harvard and all these things, he probably won't mind that I'm black, right? So I call him up, and I said, I'd like to get together. My father died when I was 12, and so I asked my uncle, can you tell me more things about my father? I don't know a lot about my father. So he agreed to meet me at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in a cafe. The day before we were going to go, I said I was going to bring my daughter. The day before, he calls me and he says, I don't think you should bring your daughter because I'm going to tell you some difficult things about your father that might be inappropriate. And I said, why don't I bring my daughter and you can meet her, and then maybe you tell me some of those things that you need to tell me another time. And he said, there isn't going to be another time. I said, okay, I won't bring my daughter then, I guess. So I went to the cafe. It's even hard to tell this story. Went to the cafe, and we talked, and it was very apparent. He came, he was going to tell me some things about my father, but he really wanted nothing to do with me and wanted me never to meet his daughters. And he actually said to me, having somebody black in my family is like being gay, and I don't want to be outed. I mean, how many groups can you insult at once, right? And that was less than 10 years ago. That was not a long time ago. And so I'm a realist that the world hasn't completely changed. There is still hostility out there. There still is discomfort. And I think when we try to pretend that there isn't, we let it happen. So we need to be aware of it, and we need to deal with it, and we need to move forward. Inclusion, embracing people who are different than us, is not a natural act. There's actually a lot of neuroscience behind the physiology of what happens when we meet somebody different than us. We actually generate different hormones. When somebody looks different, we get cortisol in our system. We can't help it. It's not something we decide to do. We have to work. We have to put in effort as leaders to grow and to overcome those tendencies and to help our teams learn. We thought that another generation would be born and all this would go away because they'd all just grow up happily living together. It's not a natural act. We must teach our children how to be inclusive, how to come together. We must talk about it. We can't just pretend it isn't there. Inclusion is competitive advantage. A lot of times we looked at diversity in corporations as compliance. We've got to do this so we don't get a lawsuit. It's really advanced. When we're talking about inclusion, it's about performance. It's about winning. It's about getting the best out of our people. 2 quick examples. There was a commercial bank in the Midwest, established long-term, and they were really trying to grow, and it's hard to grow in a mature market. And they were looking at, we've got to go after some of these Indian businesses that are coming up. Indian businesses are getting something like 10% of the new patents in the US. They represent like 2% of the population. They're getting 10% of the patents. So if you want to expand your business, you need to be able to go after that. They looked at their marketing department for commercial growth, for commercial loans. It was something like 12 white guys and 1 white woman. And so the diversity there is not about, we need to find a Hispanic and a black and a Chinese, it's not about counting noses. They needed to look for somebody who had the trust of the business communities they wanted to get in. You just hire some Indian person and send them out there, they're going to laugh at you, right? You need to find the qualifications. If you were going after tech businesses, you would find somebody who had the trust and respect of the tech businesses. And so we got to look at this in terms of performance and how are we doing it. We tend to want to be colorblind. We tend to think, oh, we just want to look at skills. We don't want to look at what their ethnicity is. But if you're going after building your market, you need to find somebody who's trusted in that community. And that ethnicity could be a part of that. Another example, Deloitte was doing a study of why they weren't winning certain kinds of RFPs. They noticed that they were losing a higher percentage of the RFPs where there were women on the buy side, a significant number of women on the buy side. And they didn't just say, oh, well, we'll put women on our team, they have women on their team, and we'll get the deal. Like we used to count noses. When they actually researched what was going on, they realized that when there's significant numbers of women on the buy side, they make their decisions differently. And there's a Harvard Business Review paper on this. You can look it up. And it's really interesting. They learned a number of things. But just to give you an example, one of the things they learned was that when there were women running the buy side, they would put out an RFP, they would listen to all the presentations, and they would adapt their specs based on what they learned. Women learn while buying, right? We do. And so they would get to the end and they would pitch their thing and they would say, well, why didn't we win? They'd say, well, you didn't have a presence in the Philippines. And they say, we do have a presence in the Philippines. It wasn't in the specs. Well, you didn't ask. They adapted their specs as they were going. And so they learned, particularly with women on the buy side, but maybe all the time, they need to be asking when they present, is there anything else that you've realized is important to you for making your decision? They need to adapt. One of the reasons, here's a way to put this in perspective of why this is so difficult for us to just do unconsciously, why we actually have to put effort into it. It's a skill for leaders to get better at this. In MIT, they did some research. They came up with the term micro-inequities. And what it is, it's tiny little differences that add up. So you could look at some little thing and say, well, that's so minor. Why are you getting worried about it? But for somebody experiencing it, it's like a paper cut. But if you get 1,000 paper cuts a week, you need medical care. And so for people who aren't experiencing it, they look at it and go, oh, that's just a little thing. And it can be things like there was a woman who was a lawyer who went in to meet her new clients. She went to their firm for a meeting, and she's standing in the conference room. She's the first one there, and she's a black woman. Somebody comes in and says, oh, go get the cream for the coffee. And that happens to you all the time. The black people are not surprised. The gasps came from people who don't experience it. But as women, we often experience it too. As somebody says, you take the notes. There's little things that aren't a big deal, but it adds up over time and can make your career progress difficult. It can make you feel less confident. So micro-inequities are a way to think about how the small things that people didn't mean anything by add up. And what they recommended that you do about it is micro-affirmations. Because we can't control it, we'll never fix all the micro-inequities, right? Because so much of it is unconscious. So what do? We micro-affirmations. So I'll give you 3 examples of that. Thomas Falk, CEO of Kimberly-Clark, said that he took all his direct reports and gave them an index card and said, write on the card the name of somebody who made a difference in your career, somebody who gave you a break, somebody who bet on you, gave you an opportunity that changed the course of your career and got you where you are now. So everybody wrote their name down. He said, okay, now turn over the card and write down the names of the people who might write your name on the card. And they did that. And he said, now look at the card and tell me if there's anyone on there who doesn't look like you. And it was a way for him to make it very personal, to say, I need you in this day and age to be bringing people along who don't necessarily look like you. And that's for all of us, right? If you're a woman, you need to be looking at black men and Asian women, or whatever. If you're a black man, you need to be looking at other kinds of people. It's all of us need to be able to embrace all kinds of people and bring them along. The Rooney Rule, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Rooney Rule in the NFL, is there was research done that said black head coaches were getting fired sooner and hired later despite having winning records than their counterparts. And so they came up, the Rooney of the Steelers helped them put together this rule, and they insisted, the rule says whenever you're hiring for a senior football team leadership position, you have to interview some minorities. And it's not a quota. You don't have to hire anyone. It just says you got to be able to interview somebody who looks different. Well, after they implemented the rule, the number of Black, and it's mainly Black. The rule is for minorities, but it's mainly African Americans in the coaching. I think there's one Hispanic coach. But it's there after the rule came in, it jumped from 6% African American coaches to 22%. So huge change just by saying, take a look. Now, that's changed. If anybody's following that or you want to look it up, there's been some changes. It's slipped back, and there's some controversies about how did that happen, what's going on. And that goes back to, this is not a natural act for us. And so you can make change, but if you don't stick to it as leaders and put effort into it, it can slip back. One more example is Mike Abershoff. He is captain of a ship. And it's like a big city, it's like you have when you have hospitals, fire departments, restaurants, everything. And he made a point of befriending people in different groups. So he would have a mentee who was a young Black male or a woman professional, or so he had a close tie in each group. And he said, I make sure that I'm listening to how I'm being heard. So as a leader, you're putting out messages, but they might be getting heard by different ways, by different cultures. And so he made sure he's listening to how he's being heard. I think that's so powerful. So I wanted to give you something to take away, something that you can do and take action on this when you think about how can I be a better inclusive leader. And I think this is a wonderful tip to start with, is involving the quiet people, because it cuts across so many different things. Is that when you think about, you have a team and you're brainstorming for ideas, and some people are always louder than others, if you can make sure you bring out the quiet people, that might help people who are more techie and research-oriented versus the people who are sales and they're always talking, Or it could bring out women who are maybe trained to be more demure, or somebody from an Asian culture that is very respectful of authority. People have different reasons about why they don't necessarily speak up or contradict you or share their ideas in a meeting. And so you can do that. LGBT, somebody who's maybe having to cover up their lifestyle, might feel that they're taking a lot of energy to do that. They might not be as comfortable as speaking out. Somebody with a disability, that they're having to accommodate their disability, they might not speak out as much. Somebody in a different time zone, like we have people on the phone from all different areas. If you have somebody on your team that is always like having to get on meetings at 9 p.m. and they're tired, maybe they're not speaking up as much. So being able to bring out the quiet people can actually, if you just do that one thing, you might be helping people across a lot of dimensions. So here's some practical tips of how to do it. I'm sure you can think of your own. I would encourage you on the next break to ask each other for some tips of how do you bring out the quiet people as a leader. Sending information ahead of time on the agenda and what will be discussed really helps introverts. They don't like to process while everybody's talking. They want to think carefully ahead of time. Everybody should think carefully ahead of time, right? So that's a good discipline to include people. For some people who aren't comfortable speaking up, tell them ahead of time, I'm going to call on you and ask you to talk about this, so get prepared for that. So somebody who might not normally speak up, you can get that to them. Just having these conversations offline about, why didn't you speak up? How can I make you more comfortable speaking up? I really want your input and ideas. Just that one thing cuts across so many different kinds of diversity. I want to close with a story about one of my mentors and coaches, Warren Witherell. And he was not just a ski coach, he was a game changer. He developed champions in snow skiing, water skiing. He changed the technology of the way we stand on our skis. I got a chance to go back 20 years after I was competing and talk to him about leadership. And he had so many wonderful things to say about how he built champions, how he helped the US get back on track in terms of winning in alpine skiing against the Europeans. But I just want to leave you with one thought that he shared with me. He said, I never built champions one at a time. I built communities of champions. Because when you have people together, pushing each other, urging each other on, sharing ideas, picking you up when you fall down, getting you back in the game and encouraging you, when you have people pushing for excellence together, everyone goes further. So I think this is a wonderful community of champions that you're a part of, being in this connection, but also when you get back home, back to your territory, to be able to bring people into this conversation about how can we be better inclusive leaders? What do we need to do to flex our style to get the most out of different cultures, different people, different time zones? What can we do? Bringing people into that conversation, you can push everyone further. Thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to meet more of you when we get on the break. Thank you.